Hey guys, and welcome back to day 9 of my 10-day algebra series. Today we are looking at inequalities. So first of all, our symbols I have up in the upper left and right hand corners. So we have our greater than and less than, and then we have our greater than or equal to and our less than or equal to. So if it has that line underneath it, that means it could equal that number. If not, it means it can be everything up until it. So what I mean by that, if we look at our first example here, it's saying x is less than 3. That means it cannot be 3, but it could be 2.99999. All right, it could be anything less than 3, but it could not be 3. So that means I'm going to have an open circle on my 3. It's not going to be filled in because it cannot equal 3. And then it's going to be anything less than that, okay? Or you could think of, if I plug in the number to the left or the right to this, what's going to work? So if I plug in 4, 4 is not less than 3, that would not work. If I plug in 2, that would work. If you plug in 1, -5, -10, -1000, all of those solutions would work. So in an inequality, it's not just an answer, x equals 3, it's infinitely many answers, or could be infinitely many answers. So we have x is less than 3, so it's everything less than 3 is a possible solution for this. Looking at my second example, now we do have that equal to sign in there. So this is saying x is greater than or equal to -7. So this time when I put my circle on -7, I am going to fill it in because it can equal -7. Now, same strategy if I try to plug in -8 or -6, which one would work? Remember, you want your alligator mouth open to the larger number. That might be something you have heard in middle school to remind you of how those symbols work. All right, so we want it open to our larger number. Our solutions are going to be greater than or equal to -7. So -6, 0, 5, 10, 100, 1000, all the way to infinity. All of those answers are solutions, so I am going to shade that in. All right, now moving on to some examples where you have to solve first. So I cannot graph this as it is. I have to get x by itself. So I'm going to treat it just like it's an equation. So just pretend that's an equal sign. We would subtract 3 from both sides to get that x is less than or equal to 1 minus 3, which would give us -2. All right, once you have solved it, you can go ahead and graph it. So just like we were doing before, we're going to put our circle at -2. Since it can be equal to it, we are going to shade it in. And this is saying x is less than -2. So which way would have my solutions being less than? All right, to the left, right? -10, -100, -1000, all of those are less than -2. So all of those would be solutions. Looking at my second example here, now this is the only thing that is different about solving inequalities from equations. So this time I have to divide by a -5. I'm going to do that to both sides, just like an equation. Now notice when I did that, in this inequality, it was starting with my negative on the left side of the inequality, and then it ended with my negative on the right side of the inequality. So whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number on both sides, you have to flip your sign. So instead of a less than, it's going to become x is greater than -2. Remember, it's not equal to, so it's going to be an open circle, and then everything greater than -2 is a solution. All right, so like I said, that is the one thing you have to remember about solving inequalities that is different from solving equations. Do all the steps the same. So here we have a 2-step inequality. So always get rid of your add and subtract first, which if you need a reminder on how to solve equations, I will link that down below. But we're going to add 5 to both sides so that it cancels out. We're left with -4b is greater than -25 plus 5, which gets us -20. And then we are going to divide both sides by a -4. So remember, when you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, it's flipping which side your negative is on, and so you have to flip your sign. So we end up with b is less than, right? Because we divided by that negative, we have to flip our sign. Instead of greater than, it's going to become less than. And then a negative 20 divided by negative 4 is a positive 5. So to graph this, we're going to go to positive 5. It is going to be an open circle because it cannot equal 5. And it's saying b is less than 5. So anything that is less than 5 would be a solution. All right, second example here. Again, it is a two-step equation. We have that whole thing on top being divided by 2. So I'm going to start by multiplying both sides by 2. And notice this time, since yes, I'm taking negative 8 times 2, but notice I'm multiplying both sides by a positive 2. So my sign is not going to flip. Our sign is only flipping if we're multiplying both sides by a negative. We're multiplying both sides by a positive 2, so we're going to just keep it greater than. All right, then from here we have a negative 8 being added on to our r, so we would have to add 8 to both sides to get rid of that, so that we'd end up with r is greater than negative 8. Then we're going to go put our circle at negative 8. It's going to be open because it cannot equal negative 8, but it is anything greater than negative 8. So we're going to have our arrow going to the right and then fill that in because it's anything greater. And then our last few inequality examples we're going to look at today are compound inequalities. So where we have multiple statements, so we have an or statement and an and statement, we'll kind of see the differences of those. Or if you have like two symbols in there, so there's like 3 parts to it, like that third example. So first, starting with our first example, it is or. So it means it's either this or that. So you'll see here once we fill this out, or once we actually do this problem, we will have kind of like 2 separate solution parts. So first thing I have to do is I have to solve these. So for that first one, I'm going to add 2 to both sides to get that m is less than negative 6. My second one, I'd have to, since it's divided by 8, we would have to multiply by 8 on both sides to get that m is also greater than 8. So this is an or statement, meaning we have this or this. So m is less than negative 6 is our first part. So I'm filling that in. I'm putting my circle at negative 6, and it's anything less than it. We also have m is greater than 8, right? Or m is greater than 8. So our second set of solutions is we're going to have a circle at positive 8, and m is anything greater than that. So we'd also have a bunch of solutions going that way, right? The in-between part is not a solution. Right, now, kind of opposite of that, when we have and, that's where it's going to kind of fill into the middle. So you'll see here I'm subtracting 8 from both sides for that first one to get that x is greater than or equal to 1. And then I'm multiplying 7 on both sides for that second part to get x is less than or equal to 7. So notice then when I go to graph this, our first one is x is greater than or equal to 1. So I'm going to put my circle at 1. And since it can be equal to it, we would fill that in, right? Because it can be both things. And then same thing with my 7, right? We know it's going to be greater than that, right? These things are going to connect because of that and. We also know that x could equal 7 or it could be less than. So notice how these two kind of connect together and we have that whole middle part of solutions. Anything less than outside of that or anything greater than outside of that is not a solution, but anything in the middle there is. And then lastly, we want to get n by itself for this last one here, so I'm going to have to subtract 9, but notice there are 3 parts, so I have to subtract 9 from each part. So negative 1 minus 9 gets us that negative 10. In the middle, that negative, or that minus 9 is going to make it cancel out so that we're just left with n. That's why we did it. And then lastly, if we do our 17 minus 9, we should end up with 8. Now this is going to end up like our and example because we have it being between 2 numbers, right? N is between -10 and a +8, right? N is greater than -10 and it's less than a +8. Cannot be equal to, so this time we'd have the open circles, and then it's anything in the middle there. Could be a solution. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future videos from me.